When you're on Fox Sports, it's a bit vanilla. Like, you've got to be careful. You can have your opinion, but you've got to be really careful what you say these days. You know all about
well, you
that.
can't always have your opinion, let me tell you.
Yeah, you can't even do that sometimes, yeah.
No, this is more of a case of when we want your opinion, we'll give it to you. So,
This is Legends with Bevo, thanks to Anytime Fitness Glenelg and Renelec Electrical Services. And now here's your host, Bevo.
Simon Hill, the golden voice of soccer, the best in the business. It's great to have you on Legends with Bevo for a chat. Now, this year, it's a bit like a pie without sauce, not having you in the coverage, mate. What's happened? Can you tell us more?
Well, it's not really for me to say. That's because obviously I reached the end of my contract with Fox Sports in June last year, and they didn't renew me. So it's as simple as that. So, I left after 14 years. Not my choice, but anyway, it was theirs. So.
Oh, well, they've made a mistake, in my opinion, and so a lot of people think the same thing, Simon. You're certainly the best in the business, like I mentioned, and well, hopefully you'll get more opportunities down the track with another network.
I hope so.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the podcast that you got going. You've got that in the background there.
Yeah.
Shim, Spider, and I can't read the bottom part there.
So much more.
So much more. I like it.
As in Craig Moore.
Craig Moore, yep, of course, a former Socceroos legend. And Zelko Kalic, did I pronounce that correctly?
Zelko Kalic.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a difficult one.
Yes, how's that all going? And tell us more about it.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, we started that after I left Fox. I'd already been in talks with Maury in particular about starting some sort of a podcast. So obviously when I left Fox, that sort of speeded the process up. They were keen to do something. We felt that the game needed extra voices. I still think the game needs extra voices, not just ours, but lots of different voices. And unfortunately, there aren't too many in the mainstream at the moment. So it's going pretty well. We've got a decent sized audience, for a new podcast. We're obviously still looking to grow it. But it's difficult because you're doing things, as you well know, on the smell of an oily rag, basically, because you're not getting paid for it. But look, people have been very good. They've been very positive. We've been helped by having a lot of fantastic guests. So we've had Ange Postecoglou, Graham Arnold, Harry Kewell, Mark Viduka. I'm trying to think of some of the others. Anyway, lots of big ex-Socceroos names and, former coaches. And they've all been very generous with their time, which is terrific. And, hopefully the fans enjoy it. When there's an issue that crops up in the game, which quite often it does, we can shoot from the hip because we're not aligned to anybody, which is a good thing, I think. I think you need that breadth of opinion. And the game has really suffered for a lack of it over the last few years.
That's actually a really good point, because obviously when you're on Fox Sports, it's a bit vanilla. Like, you've got to be careful. You can have your opinion, but you've got to be really careful what you say these days. You know all about
well, you
that.
can't always have your opinion, let me tell you.
Yeah, you can't even do that sometimes, yeah.
No, this is more of a case of when we want your opinion, we'll give it to you. So, look, it does give you that freedom, which is good. And as I say, I think because the football media, and I'm talking about the paid football media here, has virtually disappeared in this country, which in itself is an absolute disgrace, to be honest. It means that those voices are needed even more at the moment, particularly with the game really on a knife edge, certainly the professional game anyway, as to which way it's going to go. So, we try and keep people honest. And sometimes it's difficult, even though you're not being paid for it and you're not aligned to anybody, it's still a very small industry in Australia, and everybody knows everybody else. So, if you have a crack at somebody, you normally get a phone call or a text the next day. But, that's just the business, unfortunately. It's not, it's never anything personal. We all want the game to grow and succeed in this country. And sometimes you got to be honest.
Yeah, well said. And like I mentioned before, and you can tell my frustration with you not being in the game, Simon. I just think it's an absolute shame not hearing your voice this year on the coverage. And I really hope Foxtel just realises this and turn things around, because it's not the same without you. So,
it's political. I fought very hard on behalf of football, and they didn't want football opinions. It's as simple as that. So. The good thing is that people, I think, in the football community, they now realise that. They understand it. So, that's what Fox have got to answer for. That's their business. It's their prerogative.
Yeah, well said.
I don't work there anymore, so I don't have to stay quiet. And let's just see where the TV rights go. I mean, look, they may end up remaining with Fox because obviously money is a big thing for the game. I understand that personally, and I think from the game's point of view, and it's not just my own personal selfishness, but I think the game needs to go somewhere else. I think it needs a fresh start.
And your podcast, where do we actually find that? Is it just on your Apple Podcast, Spotify, usual places where you find podcasts? Yep.
Yeah, all the usual places, Apple, Spotify, Google. It's actually on Acast, I think, is the platform that we have it on. So, you can find it in plenty of places. Just do a quick Google search and you'll, whilst Google still exists in Australia, then you'll find it.
Wonderful. You've had some big guests there. Far out. I'll definitely tune in on that one, Simon. And also you're doing some good stuff there with Newcastle Jets involved as the MC. Bit of a different role for you. How's that going?
Yeah, well, I'm doing lots of different roles at the moment, working for lots of, different employers, only on a freelance basis. But Newcastle Jets were good enough to invite me up to be their ground announcer on certain home games. They needed a ground announcer because I don't know what happened to the last one or whether they just weren't available. And obviously I need the money. I've got to earn a living. So, look, it's a good short-term arrangement. It's not a career move. It's not what I want to do long term. And I'm sure that, the Jets have their own plans as well. But in the interim, it sort of suits us both. So I'm doing a bit of that. I've been hosting some radio shows for 1170 SEN here in Sydney. I've been doing a bit of work for a betting company, not big on gambling, but that's unfortunately they're the people that pay the money these days. And doing a pre-game show for Sydney FC. I'm hosting a quiz show, doing the podcast, doing some writing for the A-League website and various other people. So it's been very varied, which has been enjoyable. And I've been pretty busy, to be honest. And it's good because obviously it enables me to pay my bills, whilst I wait for that next opportunity, wherever that might be it, here in Australia or maybe when the pandemic finally gives up, maybe overseas. We'll see.
And what else have you been doing to keep yourself busy? You like to exercise and have hobbies and that sort of thing as well, aside from the football?
Well, I don't know about exercise so much, to be honest. I try, but not so good at the moment. A bit overweight at the moment. But no, I play in a band. I play in a heavy metal cover band. I play the drums, and we did a gig last Friday, which went down very well. So I enjoyed that. I was rehearsing with them last night, actually. So that's my big sort of passion outside football. I've always been
What's their name? Give them a plug.
The name of the band is Green Manalishi. So we play covers of heavy metal bands in the 80s, the new wave of British heavy metal, really. So Iron Maiden, Motorhead, Judas Priest, going back a bit further, Black Sabbath, one or two others. So yeah, we love it. We rock.
I think you should come over to Adelaide and play a gig or two. That would be sensational.
Well, if we could fly, we'd be happy to. But getting the equipment down there might be a bit of a problem. But no, we'd love to come and play in Adelaide. That'd be great fun.
Oh, good stuff there. And obviously, let's go back to 2005. It was one of the best moments in recent years, not only in sport, but obviously in football as well. When you were there, you called all the action. It was 2005, Australia taking on Uruguay. That penalty shootout, John Aloisi, he scored the goal. For the first time in 32 years, Australia qualified for the World Cup. Simon, talk us through it.
Well, as I've said many times, to be honest, that call is not one of my favourites. And the reason for that is it's multi-layered, really. So first of all, I'd been in Montevideo for the first leg 4 days prior, so I was very tired. I was very jet-lagged, and I hadn't slept too much in the build-up to that game. Secondly, as I'm sure you remember, Craig Foster sort of yelped and screamed and applauded all the way throughout the call, which made things very, very difficult in a professional sense. And I remember going home that night, and I was exhausted, to be honest. The tension and the emotion of it all, I fully recognised that it was a brilliant night for Australia. But I remember going home that night and thinking we're going to get smashed for that in the morning. And of course we didn't. And the reason for that is Australia won. And it's a good lesson, for all sports broadcasters who, have it in your head that you're the central theme to all of this. You're not. It's about the players. It's about the result. It's about the emotional investment in that result. And look, I'm pleased that, people remember it in such a great way. And it's funny, your intro, that brilliant night, Had Australia lost, I don't think anybody would remember that night. They might remember how bad our call was. So that's the lesson for sports broadcasters. And it's a nice thing to be associated with. But when I watch it back, to be honest, I cringe. I hate it. I much prefer the World Cup in Germany 2006.
Well, that was actually my next question. What have been some of your favourite moments in the comm box?
There's a lot. Certainly that World Cup in Germany in 2006, all the grand finals, some of the big blues, the derbies, some of our brilliant trips that we had overseas with the Socceroos, going to crazy places like Kyrgyzstan and Lebanon and, Vietnam and Uruguay, Brazil for the World Cup, South Africa for the World Cup, Russia for the World Cup. There's been so many. And, I think a lot of people also, and I understand why, they tend to think that I started my career in Australia. I had 10 years as a broadcaster in the UK before I came out to Australia. So there's a few, that precede coming to this part of the world as well. I called an FA Cup final in 1996. And for a kid growing up in Northern England, which I did, calling an FA Cup final at Wembley, that was a massive honour. Calling, my own team, Manchester City, at Main Road, wow. Going to events like the African Cup of Nations, which I did in 1998. I spent 6 weeks in Burkina Faso, and people go, well, I've never heard of that tournament, or I don't understand what that's about. But trust me, the life experience of spending 6 weeks in Burkina Faso doing a major tournament was just absolutely sensational. So there's an awful lot that I've done, and an awful lot more that I'm grateful for, and it's all thanks to football. It's given me everything, and I owe it everything.
And the other side of things, the embarrassing moments or the bloopers, the sort of highlights where the things you may want to forget. Have you had some of those, Simon?
Things I want to forget. Yeah, look, there's a few down the years. I had a very embarrassing moment very early on in my career, actually. When I was working as a radio host, I was hosting a sports show, not commentating, for a little radio station in South Wales called Red Dragon FM. And we used to have an old phone panel. You'll recognise this being a radio, where you line up your callers and have them on hold, waiting to go on. And I had about 5 reporters ready to go. And my Cardiff City reporter, a guy called Phil Suarez, who tragically is no longer with us. He died of cancer many years ago. But he was a mad football fan, mad Cardiff City fan. And he was, I think, second or third in line to go on air. And every time I went to go to him, there was a try in the other rugby, because, of course, rugby was massive in South Wales. So we had all these rugby reporters, and I said I'd go on the sort of sneaky talkback and say, Phil, I'm sorry, mate, but there's been a try at Pontypridd, so I'll have to come back to you. And I could hear him muttering under his breath, bloody rugby, because he didn't like rugby, and I didn't much either. So anyway, I must have kept him waiting for about 5 or 10 minutes, and eventually I said, let's go over. I think it was Walsall against Cardiff City. I said, let's check in at the Bestcott Stadium. Phil Suarez is our reporter there for Red Dragon FM Sport. What's the latest, Phil? And I pulled the fader up, and there was a whole burst of crowd noise, but there was no Phil. And I said, mate, it sounds a bit noisy there. I'm not sure Phil can hear us. Can you hear us, Phil? And again, there was just crowd noise and nothing. And I said, Phil Suarez, come in. We want the latest from Walsall against Cardiff City. To which a voice said, I'm just holding the phone for him, mate. He's gone for a piss.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And he'd obviously had enough, and he'd gone, you know what, I'm going to the toilet. He can wait. So there's been a few of those down the years, but thankfully not too many.
And this year's A-League, what an absolute start to the season. We've seen Central Coast Mariners top of the table, and our new team, new boys obviously in the competition, MacArthur, who had a 4-0 win against Adelaide on Friday night, first and second respectively. Who would have guessed that, Simon?
Well, I don't think anybody would have tipped the Mariners to be up there, that's for sure. MacArthur, I always fancied would have a good season. I'm not sure they're going to win it, but I think you look at the mix that they've got in their squad of youth and experience. You know, the likes of Mark Milligan, Adam Federici, the two Spaniards are brilliant, Markel Susayatra and Benyat Echevarria. Matt Derbyshire up front, the French boy, Loic Puyo. You know, they've got real quality in that team and some good young kids, Lockie Rose as well, Michael Roos, who I watched in pre-season and was impressed by. So I think, and also, of course, they've got a good coach in Ante Milicic. So I think MacArthur could go quite close to sort of emulating the Wanderers and winning the premiership in the first season. So far as the Mariners are concerned, look, I don't know if it's going to last, but every week they seem to win at the moment, which is just amazing. And it's just such a great story for the A-League because they've won, if that's the right word, the wooden spoon, 3 seasons in a row. And yet here they are right at the other end of the ladder, and Melbourne Victory are bottom. It's almost like the A-League's upside down. It's sort of weird, but, you know, full credit to Alan Stajic. They're much more difficult to beat this season. Matty Simon's leading them well on the park. They've got exciting kids in Alu Cool and one or two others. And Ollie Bozanic has made a real difference in midfield. So I'm delighted for the Mariners. They've suffered for a long time.
Well said. And obviously for the Adelaide listeners or viewers, in terms of their season so far, they've been good at home, but away from home, it's a different story. They can't seem to get the chocolates away from home. What do you put that down to, Simon?
Yeah, look, I think in fairness, I think they, in the last outing where they got well beaten by MacArthur, I think, you know, they had a few injuries. Michael Jakobsen was out. Ryan Kitto was out. I think it was one of the Ryan Strain. You know, that's virtually the entire back four, really. So you're playing one or two players out of position. So I had a bit of sympathy for them against MacArthur. But, yeah, I don't quite know what's gone wrong. It's difficult to put your finger on at the moment because they made such a good start under Carl Weert and looked very much more organised defensively than they were under Hercham Babake, for example, in the latter days anyway. I still think they'll come good, the Reds. I think they'll be okay. But they're just in that little bit of a form dip at the moment. But that happens in the A-League. You know, the teams are so evenly matched. You know, you can find a team that wins 4 or 5 in a row and then loses 4 or 5 in a row. I know, as you know, having commentated the A-League for so many years, you look for patterns to emerge in the clubs and you can't find any in terms of the results because it's so up and down, which makes for an exciting competition, but it doesn't necessarily make for a great narrative. So I think they'll be okay, the Reds, but yeah, they're just in that little bit of a form dip at the moment.
I do agree with you, though. I think an even competition's a great thing. I know we spoke off air that you're not a fan, or you don't really follow the AFL, but you know we've seen a very even competition.
Follow it at all.
The competition's become a lot even in recent years, and it's great to see. And you mentioned that the A-League, it's so even at the moment. Anyone can beat anyone on the day, and I think that's a promoter's dream, really.
Yeah, in some ways. Look, I understand. I think it's I understand why you say that. I think it's a very Australian mentality, to be honest. I would like to see us not necessarily have 1 or 2 teams dominate, but I'd like to see us develop the concept of big clubs and small clubs. I mean, we sort of have that to a certain degree. You know, Sydney FC are a big club, Melbourne Victory are a big club. But Victory are bottom of the league at the moment. And, you know, that's the vagaries of a salary cap, basically, that evens things up every season. Now, I would be in favour of that if every year the competition level went up. But I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. Yeah, we've had a great start this year. I'm not denying that at all. But I think if we're evening up to accommodate the lowest common denominator, then we're not necessarily improving the standard of the league. That's why I'm not a fan of salary caps, because your best players at the end of a season, they move on. And I'm not just talking about the very top players. I'm talking about the middle ranked players. I'll give you one example. A few years ago, Bruce Jitte, who was a very important player for Adelaide United, he wasn't, you know, an Isaias or a big foreign superstar that had come into the league, but he was a very important player for Adelaide United. And he went overseas, I think, for an extra paycheck of maybe $50,000 or $60,000. Now, you can understand why he wanted to do that, because it's a short career. Players have to earn money. But really, Adelaide should have been able to keep him. And that was because they'd had to manoeuvre things around. They didn't have enough room in the salary cap. That's not good for the league. It's not good for the league. And everybody goes, oh, it's a really even competition. Yeah, well, okay. But if all the teams are equally average, then that doesn't make for a great league. And unfortunately, we see the results of that in the Asian Champions League all too often.
Yes.
Because those bigger clubs in different countries who have that extra money to spend, and look, we're never going to compete with the Chinese Super League or even the teams in the Gulf in terms of money, but you can give your teams a better chance. And that's why I don't agree with salary caps. They're made for sports like Aussie Rules and Rugby League because they have a player pool that is exclusively drawn out of Australia and they can't go anywhere else. So, of course, they're going to have the best players here. We don't have that luxury. We're a global game competing with 200 other countries. And that's why we need global practice for our competition, in my opinion.
That's why you're the best in the business. You've said that very, very well, Simon, and I 100% agree with you. And obviously that's why we're losing so many players, so many good players to overseas as well. We saw Riley McGree leave Adelaide United, which has hurt them a fair bit. And we're seeing obviously the emergence of Mohamed El Touré this season, but no doubt he's going to go overseas within the next year or two. And so,
yeah, but look, sorry to interrupt. I think you're not going to keep the Riley McGrees. You're not going to keep the Mo Tourés. Everybody understands that because at some point they want to go to Europe. That's not the problem. The problem is the next tier of players. You want to be developing your Mo Tourés and you want to be selling them on and getting money to invest in your next generation, the next Mo Tourés. What you don't want to be doing is losing the Jordan Elseys of this world. Losing with respect the Isaias of this world. You know, he went off to the Qatar. He's not going to go and play for Real Madrid in Europe, but he was lost to a different league in Asia because there was a bit more money on offer, and he had to take it because he was 32. So that's the tier of player I'm talking about. That's what hurts the league. Your good young kids will always come through, and the best ones will always go to Europe, and that's good. We want that. You should get transfer fees for them commensurate for that talent, but you don't stop them going. It's that middle tier of players that should be staying in the A-League, and even a lot of those are going overseas.
Really good point.
$1,000.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Obviously, we're seeing Goodwin come back to the Reds, which is a huge in for them. And like you mentioned before, it may turn their season around. It's in a bit of a slump at the moment, and a player like that, we know how good a player he is. His class could really help them out, but we'll watch the space for that one, Simon. Another thing you must be very excited about is the way your beloved Man City are going in the Premier League, top of the table and ahead of your arch rival Man United. Now, that must make you happy.
Yeah, but we're going pretty well at the moment. That's an understatement. 16 consecutive wins. Pep Guardiola had a lot of question marks against him at the start of the season, but he's answered pretty much all of them. And you know, when you consider that they're doing all this without Kevin De Bruyne and Sergio Aguero, I mean, when those two are fit, goodness me, watch out. But what he's done this season in particular, of course, is he's fixed the defence. Which was always City's Achilles heel. Even when they were winning trophies, they were a little bit leaky at the back. But the acquisition of Ruben Diaz has been a real masterstroke. And he's brought the best out of John Stones alongside him as well. So all of a sudden they look very, very solid at the back. And they've coped with the absence of De Bruyne and Aguero. Ilkay Gundogan is having a terrific season. He's playing a more advanced role. Raheem Sterling is sort of floating around that front third. Ditto Ferran Torres, who scored a fair few goals as well. And of course, we're seeing the emergence of Phil Foden. Now that David Silva has departed, and I mean, he's the most exciting talent I've seen. A young talent that's come through the ranks at City in probably 20 years. He's an amazing kid, and he's only 20.
That's exciting for someone so young, isn't it? So
absolutely, and he's a City fan as well. He's from nearby Stockport. They call him the Stockport Iniesta, and he can play 4 or 5 different positions. And 2 weeks ago, he went to Anfield and absolutely bossed the game and scored a worldie at the end. So the sky's the limit, literally, for him.
Let's hope your Man City can keep on going and take home the Premier League. Now, before we let you go, mate, I just wanted to ask you a question I like to ask a lot of our guests. This would be a hard one for you to answer because you've probably had dinner with many famous people, but 3 famous people that you haven't had dinner with, past or present, in terms of whether being alive or dead, who would they be?
I actually haven't had dinner with a lot of famous people, to be honest. I know everybody thinks journalists and commentators hang out with stars 24/7. I don't. It's always been them and us for me. You know, I know which side of the fence I'm on. So 3 people that I would like to have dinner with. Okay, so one would be Neil Peart. I don't know whether you've ever heard of him. He unfortunately passed away about 6 or 9 months ago. He was the drummer in Rush, a rock band from Canada, who was my absolute idol in terms of drumming. He's just phenomenal. So I'd love to sit around a dinner table, even posthumously, with Neil Peart and try and pick his brains as to how he became such a fantastic drummer. Unfortunately, all 3 of mine are dead. So the second one would be Colin Bell, who was my all-time football hero. Growing up as a kid in Manchester, he was the footballer that I loved the most. Played in the 70s and 80s. Unfortunately, got a very serious knee injury in 1975, which curtailed his career. Otherwise, he won 48 caps for England. It should have been over 100, but unfortunately, the injury did for him. So he would be the second one. He again only passed away, I think it was in January. So yeah, very, very sad day. I shed a tear about that. Now the third one is probably very controversial, but I will explain why. My third one would be Adolf Hitler.
Oh, jeez.
Now, the reason for that is, no, I am not a Nazi or a fascist. In fact, completely the opposite. But I am a huge political history buff. I have watched so many documentaries about the Second World War, and even to this day, I cannot fathom how somebody can be so evil and contain so much hatred for one race of people in particular. So I would love to sit down with Adolf Hitler and just say, why?
That's the most interesting answer I've ever had, I reckon, in my life. That's phenomenal, Simon. But you've explained it very well. And I think all 3 of those I can... they're a very different type of people, but you've answered it.
I don't think they'd get on.
No. It'd make for a very interesting dinner. And you've got an Akadaka t-shirt there. I presume you've seen Akadaka a few times in concert?
I've only ever seen them once. To be honest, I was due to go and watch them the first time in 1999 at Wembley when I was still living in England. And the day before the gig, I was working at the BBC at the time, and the BBC phoned me up and said, we need you to do a game tomorrow. It's Sunderland Newcastle at the Stadium of Light. And I couldn't turn that down. I had to go and do it. So unfortunately, I had to give my ticket away. But I did manage to see them when Malcolm Young was still alive and, still obviously had everything about him in Sydney a few years ago. So I did get to see them. Yeah, I love AC/DC. They're not my favourite band, but they're up there amongst the top 10, that's for sure.
And they met your expectations, their concert as well, in terms of being live? Yeah.
To be honest, the only thing that disappointed me about the concert is that I was probably one of the few people who knew all the songs. The rest of the crowd sat there humming along to various tunes, and they'd get up for Thunderstruck and 1 or 2 of the other more famous ones. The rest of them, it was just me. Because I've got so many of their albums. I know all their songs, but nobody else seemed to, which I thought was weird, given this is their country.
It is interesting, isn't it? Obviously, you're a true fan then. So,
yeah.
And just finally, I know it's a hard one because it's still a long way to go in the season, but A-League grand finalists this year, who do you think they'll be?
I still think Sydney will be there. They've been so consistent over the last 4 or 5 years. I know they're not right up there at the moment, but they'll come good. Particularly with Bevo to come in, which I think he's probably going to this next batch of games. So I think Sydney FC will be one of them. At the start of the season, I think I said Melbourne City would be the other, which is, of course, the grand final we had last year, but I'm not so sure about them at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if we see MacArthur in the grand final, to be honest.
Wouldn't that be good?
No disrespect to the Mariners. If they reach the finals, that's like winning the thing for them after what they've been through. But, I quite fancy MacArthur at the moment.
Yeah, well said. It would be a bit like Leicester City back in the day as well, with the Mariners, wouldn't it? So,
well, it would be not for the salary cap.
Yes. Oh, Simon Hill, what a pleasure it's been getting on Legends with Bevo for a chat today, mate. Thanks so much for joining us. And like I mentioned before, hopefully we'll see you back in the Fox Sports commentary box, where you should be in the future.
Not in the Fox Sports commentary box, you won't.
But surely
in a commentary box.
A commentary box. Well, maybe they'll realise what a mistake they made and turn things around. But
no, I would not go back there.
You wouldn't go back there? Oh, no. Okay. Well, definitely in a commentary box of some sorts, because that's where you should be. Like I said, it's like a pie without sauce this particular season without you there.
That's very kind.
Thanks so much. And big shout out to a friend of yours and a friend of mine as well, Ben Dale, for teeing up the chat with yourself. He's a good fella, Benny.
Good to see you, Benny.
Take care, mate, and speak again soon.
Cheers.
PodBooth. Sounds so good.